we're back and we're moving into our second conversation for today, where we are discussing the major issues facing the education sector. As we head to the polls next Wednesday, what do we got to keep in mind when we think of education? And here with us to have this conversation, we have the National President of the Belize National Teachers Union, Elena Smith, and the National Secretary at the BNTU, Ruth Showman. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning, ladies.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, too, for being with us and being a part of our election preparation. So, in essence, what we're doing is kind of breaking down for people some of the big issues and decisions that are to be made by the next administration that takes office. And clearly, given the state that we are in currently with education, there's going to be a lot to tackle. From your perspective, what are your thoughts on the biggest issues that will have to be addressed after November 11th?
Okay, so thank you, Marlene. A bit taken aback, but in terms of education, as you know, BNTU has been raising several concerns over the years, and especially now that we are in this pandemic. So we have some wide areas that we want to look at in terms of what we think, should be looked at and how they should be addressed. And so I think for right now, for this situation that we're in right now, I think one of the things that we need to look at is the matter of the curriculum. Mm-hmm. And so what is it that we are doing to ensure that our students right now, because of the situation that we're going through right now, that our students are benefiting, that they're being engaged, and that we are not overloading them as they too are going through their own little things in their mind as we go through the pandemic. So one of the things that we believe that we should be looking at, or whoever should come in, be looking at, would be the curriculum and how that should change to meet what is happening right now, to cater to what is happening right now. And we thought, we had a discussion with the ministry some time ago, and we shared with them that we felt that for right now, during this period of time, there should be some sort of change to the curriculum where, for example, the lower levels, the lower division, would not be focusing on all subject areas, but we would be focusing on, as we used to say in the old time days, the 3 R's: reading, the writing, and the arithmetic. So that we can build that foundation, because they have missed out quite a bit. This distance learning, while they're getting work and while the teachers are doing their best to ensure that they are actively engaged, it is not the same as when they are in the classroom. And so, the teaching that would be happening in the classroom is not happening at home. So for that reason, we thought that there is going to be a need for us to shift what we normally do and do something differently. Yeah. Now, I'm sure you've heard about the abridged curriculum, but that is not necessarily what we're looking at. We're looking at minimizing the subject areas for the infant division to cater to exactly what they need to be able to build a strong foundation. And those would be, as I said, the reading and the writing and the math.
Let's stick up in there quickly and let me ask a question here. How do we measure productivity and effectiveness in terms of the education system at this point in time? We're talking remote or distance learning for students who are either at the primary, secondary, or tertiary level. My concern more so has to do with the primary level at this point, considering the fact that you have students who are in primary school who may not necessarily have access to the resources, should I say, to follow along or to be constantly engaged on a daily basis in the classroom sessions.
And that's a huge concern, Isani, and one that we have been discussing, because it's not just about having access. That's a huge factor, yes. But in terms of, say, the teachers sending work home, it still doesn't mean that the children are doing the work and that they are being placed in a situation where they are able to sit and do the work. So when you get back those packages and you are checking and you are correcting what you correct and the grade, if you will, that the child gets on these papers does not necessarily match what it is that the child actually knows how to do on his or her own. So the access is an aspect, but the other aspect is really and truly, is it that the child is doing the work on his or her own, or the child actually has grasped the concept, or is it that the child is being given all the answers? And so you may think that the child is moving along well, but when the child actually comes back to the classroom, then you will see the difference.
Yeah.
So access right now is for sure keeping back some students from being engaged the way we want them to, or the way we need them to be engaged at this point in time. I'm speaking for primary, because Ruth will deal with secondary.
Yeah.
And especially in our rural areas, some of these schools, they keep asking us, when are they going to get the $5? When are they going to get the $5? Because the school has already used up its resources. A lot of parents have not paid in their registration fees, which would normally be what is being used to purchase these supplies for school. And if that hasn't been paid, then the school is without funds. And so they can only go so far in terms of printing from their own resources that they have.
Yeah. So I hear the first issue for you, and let's be clear, because there are going to be two issues here. There's going to be the focus on education and what the children get, but then there's also talking about teachers and the educational system. Let's keep on this track with the education and curriculum. Any administration that comes in, you would like to see, as the leader of the union, look at the current curriculum being used for distance learning. But the question is, distance learning itself is supposed to be a temporary measure. What about having that conversation about when and under what circumstances the children and the teachers return to school?
And that is where, Marlene, those other details will come in. Because it is not just about right now while we're doing distance learning, because you would appreciate that when the children return to the classroom, there's going to be a gap.
Oh, yes.
And that gap has to be filled. And so the change is not only for now, but we will need to keep that change for a period of time until our students are able to catch up. So that is one part of it. The other part of it is, how is it that we are going to be able to address our teachers' needs in terms of them being able to have enough at their disposal to bring these students up to where they should be.
Yeah.
And so, the necessary materials, training if necessary, all of those additional helps that they will need to bring up our students to where they need to be.
Yeah.
Secondary school would have their own issues, and maybe Ruth can jump in now and share some of the issues in terms of secondary school from the aspect or the perspective of the curriculum as well.
And Marlene, if I may here, I would like to stick up in on what you said just now. Let's not just focus on the now, but later.
Yes.
But in education, we cannot afford to pause. We cannot afford to pause. This is where planning, in education, planning is key. So how dare we look at our children and say we don't have a curriculum that can suit their needs right now? It was the leadership's responsibility to ensure that there was a curriculum in place, a plan A or a plan B, and this is where we're failing. We need to ensure that we are prepared at all times. And at the high school level, let me focus a bit on that. In the high school, we have the CSEC, who's not waiting for anyone. We have these CSEC exams where the students, sometimes future is held on to these exams, and we cannot afford to pause. Where are we with these exams? As is, for the first time, we get a whole heap of ungraded subjects. We look at the results of the CSEC this past year, and these are reflecting a problem And are we going to get to the bottom of this problem? Are we really looking at the bottom of this problem? You know, sometimes we forget that in education, reflection is key. And in reflecting, we have to admit that we made mistakes. And if we don't admit those mistakes, we will more than likely repeat them. So were mistakes made with these CXC exams? Of course. And I'm hoping, because I haven't heard anything concrete other than everything is tentative, I'm hoping that these mistakes are rectified. It is unfair to have students who have consistently at times gotten all A's, getting results that do not reflect their academic status for the past probably 13 years. You know, so
See, and those
can
are,
we afford to pause for the now? No.
Yeah.
I have a heap
But-
of questions that pertain to the curriculum. Teachers are feeling overwhelmed. They feel that they're teaching for CXC and not to cater for skill building as they should be focusing. And while CXC is focusing on just getting this exam done no matter what, and you know, we know that there is money involved because these exams are not for free. So what is really the driving force behind CXC? We have the investigative lab components that have to be done in person. Will these be waived? There are so many questions. Will the SBA be adjusted because manipulation and measurements cannot be carried out in the science? You know, we have the SBAs, for example, for social studies, for all these other areas that require that children go out there and gather data. Will these be required?
That's a valid point. You know, when I think of what happened with the CSEC examinations this year, there was a period of uncertainty and then a decision made fairly close to the time of the exams that the children would in fact sit the exams. Is it then something that you're suggesting that there be a decision made early enough to say that the children will not have to prepare and sit these exams, or are we waiting on regional guidance? How important is this for teachers, especially since they are developing a new way of teaching through distance learning?
So Marlene, I think at this, sorry Ruth, I think at this time right now, our students, we are at the point where November, December is when parents have to go and pay for CXCs.
That's right.
So we should have known by now whether these exams, you know, whether they will be sitting them or not. What we have been hearing from our teachers is that they don't believe that our students are ready for these exams. Remember that these same students,
they haven't been in class since March.
Exactly, from March last year, and so they have not been able to do as much as they would have been doing in terms of, say, being in the classroom, and especially those students who, as we said earlier, don't have the access, you know, to these resources to be able to participate in these online classes. So from their perspective, it would be unfair to have our students sit these exams. But when do we get this definitive response? Do we wait until parents have paid the money and then they can't get it back? You know, do we tell them last minute and then they have to be rushing to find monies? Monies are hard to come by right now. So a decision, I know that there was a survey was sent out, but we don't know what are the results of those surveys and, you know, how many persons took part in those surveys. So it's not just that. You have to sit down and have these discussions with the teachers who are involved, not just the principals.
And I was going to ask that, So looking at, you know, after November, there's going to be a new Minister of Education. And so you are going to be put in a position where decisions are going to be made. And I know, Elena, as union president, you have repeatedly spoken of the need for consultations for decisions, when decisions are being made. Some of the big decisions include what happens when this pandemic is over. It will come to an end eventually, and there will be a return to as close as what we knew as normal before. Will there be, the year be redone? How do you catch up? All the other decisions that will come along with that. So what do you propose as a way forward to ensure that you have that consultation, because the teachers will know best as to what's happening in the classrooms?
Agree. And right now, you will appreciate that there's going to be no consultations right now.
Yeah.
There's no time for that right now. There's barely even time to respond to questions, when they are asked. But we are hoping, Marlene, that whoever becomes the new government, that as soon as possible we can have an initial meeting with the Minister of Education, and we can have these discussions. Because again, if you expect that teachers will be bringing these children up to where they should be within a reasonable time, then you have to ensure that they have the tools that they need to do so. And who better to share these things than the teachers who are actually in it? They're the ones doing it. And a lot of times the ministry forgets, or the way it consults, it does not involve those persons who are the ones actually doing the job. So we are hoping that as quickly as possible we can have a meeting, we can sit down, and we may not have all of the answers to all of these things right away, but we can set a timetable and say, okay, these are the things that we will be doing, and this is how we are going to be doing them, and these are going to be the consultation processes. We're going to be meeting with this group and this group and this group, so that we know that within maybe 2 months or so time frame, we would have had certain things put in place. Of course, they should be coming in with some ideas and some suggestions as to what it is that they believe should be done. But those should be shared with us as quickly as possible, so that we can provide our input as well. It's not just...
The question from my end is whether or not there is a particular concern from you guys as the teachers union in respect of the fact that coming in will be a new Minister of Education who, for all intents and purposes, may be coming in with a totally different idea or suggestion as to how to go about addressing this issue. But looking at the fact that the current academic year is underway, and in light of the COVID pandemic, things are moving rather quickly. And it would seem as if though a new minister would mean a new reset button being hit and perhaps starting from scratch in terms of his or her policies.
Not necessarily, Isani, and we are hoping that that would not be the case at the start. Of course, you would come in with your own views and your own ideas and your own projects that you want to carry out, in your term as a minister. But there are certain things that you can't just come in and just change just like that. You have to have a plan. Yes, you have to go in with a plan. But as I said before, if it is that we are able to have an early meeting and an early discussion, we can look at these things and we can offer suggestions, we can offer advice. At the end of the day, as I said, and I keep saying, we are the ones who are going through what is happening. And so I think we would be the better persons to share with the ministry. And when I say we, I'm talking about teachers. Share with the ministry, what are the changes that need to happen, and when and how they can happen.
So
and if I may, President, here, I would also like to expand on something. Education, I believe, will never be the same. I think this pandemic has revolutionized so many things, including education. And so we cannot come in with the mindset of the status quo, that we're just going to take what we had and make some changes here and there, because things are not the same anymore. We have to ensure that whomever is going to be taking over is innovative, is willing to look at things from a fresh perspective, that is willing to look at it from a teacher's perspective, from a parent's perspective, from a community, from a national perspective. I think for the longest, the curriculum has not been in line with what the demands of our countries are. We are not. We are producing students who are not capable to deal with what this global community is requesting. And so we need to start thinking bigger. We cannot start with just looking at things from, we got a grant and they're requesting that we do this, and so we have to do that.
Ruth.
2 months later, I always say we're filled with pilots and the planes never take off.
Ruth, I love what you're saying. And I think that allows me the opportunity to expand the conversation, because we have talked about kind of the short-term goals that you are paying attention to in terms of what decisions have to be made. But there are long-term goals, and we don't know the residual effects of the pandemic as yet on our children. But we do know that the landscape, the global landscape, is going to change dramatically. So looking long-term in terms in addressing our educational needs, what are some of the things that you would like to see whoever the new Minister of Education be able to tackle, taking into consideration that education takes one of the largest portions of our budget. It's technically a well-resourced ministry. How do you ensure that that's going to be put to good use?
I personally would like to see strength in whomever is leading. First of all, strength, because it takes a lot of strength and wisdom and love for your people, for your children, to be able to say, will this $100,000 grant that I'm getting worth the changes in curriculum that comes with it? Will it hurt my people? I think that we need to start making some serious decisions as leaders. We need to ensure that we have leaders who are strong enough to say, this is the curriculum we're sticking to, because this is what will take our nation to another level. We are supposed to be developing. Are we developing? And if we are, at what pace? Is it good enough? You know, we are losing our children every single day. If we don't lose them to violence or to teenage pregnancy, we lose those who manage to go through education to another country. So what are we doing to ensure that we are educating our children? What are we doing to ensure that we are keeping our children? What are we doing as a nation to ensure that those who get qualified to come back and invest their expertise in our country? As a teacher, I can tell you that I have a large percentage of students, my students, who left Belize and never returned, simply because when I ask them, one would tell me, Miss, I'm going to come back to someone. I have a master's degree, and I will come back to someone with an associate's degree who will have a higher salary than I do, but because of this and that, I will forever be under that person. So that we have to change the mindset of our children. And the only way we can do that is through action, through serious action. So I am looking at the next person, whomever we have to sit with, strength. The strength to say, my people first, my children first, and nothing else. I'm not interested in hearing which party or which people first, our children. We are a young nation. And COVID revealed that most of our population is young. What are we seriously doing? We can't just issue laptops and not provide the necessary components that go with it. I'm happy to hear the laptops are being issued. It's a great initiative, but it takes much more than that. And the seriousness, the strength of our politicians to say, even if I become unpopular with my party, but I will do what is right for my people. And that is what I think our children are hoping to hear. The more I talk to young people, the more I hear that. And I'm happy to hear that because we need that shift. And I think that shift is coming.
Yeah. Do you think, and you noted earlier that you think there has to be a new look at the curriculum that is currently being rolled out? Now, I know the teachers have spoken many times about introduction of new elements here, introduction of new elements here. Is it a complete rethink that you are hoping will be in the near future? And, you know, what are some of the areas that you feel perhaps are neglected that any new administration will have to seriously look at?
I believe, oh, go ahead, President.
Go ahead, Ruth.
Okay, I believe that for us as teachers, we always look at what is being used, look at the strengths of what was being used, and get rid of what was not working. In anything. We can't just completely disregard. We have to embrace what works and then grab on to the new. We need to ensure that we are catering to the new norms to the new demands. We cannot be producing students with the curriculum we have that this new globalized world is requesting. We are not. We are like 20 years behind with the curriculum. So by the time our children are ready to go out there into the real world, they're not ready. They're not ready. And it is unfair to the children. It's unfair to the teachers, because if the teachers, you see, the parents will turn around and blame the teacher. But if the teacher does not teach what is being imposed on them, then they're chastised for it. Their increments are tied to it, and it is an unfair system. I think that the teachers are not involved enough in the decision making of the curriculum. The teachers know what is needed, yet they are kept silent. We're not involved enough. We should not be afraid to voice our opinions, and we should have committees and systems in place that allows the voices of teachers to be heard loudly and clearly and to be taken under consideration. Because truthfully, I've heard from leaders that consultation is just come and informing you. And we were told that personally, and I was really appalled with that, because if that is consultation, then we're in real troubles. I believe that curriculum needs a complete rehashment, but then again, we also need to look at what works, hold on to that, and move forward. But we do need to see a complete change with new vision, innovation, and using technology.
Let's shift gears now and talk about the needs of the teachers. And Elena, I'll ask you about this one, because we know one of the more contentious issues has been looking at teachers' salary when you talk about adjustments and the way you guys fought for that. But moving forward, there is going to be quite a bit of conversation looking at the salaries and the wages that have to be paid. What are some of the things that you are hoping are going to be a part of the discussion with the teachers after a new administration takes office?
I'm not sure, Marlene, that the focus is going to be primarily on salaries. You know, that would be an aspect, but what we are seeing where there is now a shift, sort of a shift a bit from that to looking at other areas. So I think one of the areas in terms of salaries, one of the areas that we would be looking at, and these are not new things, it's in terms of, say, our secondary school teachers who are heads of departments. The rules are very clear as to where they should be on the pay scale. However, these heads of departments have not been placed on those pay scales, and we're having issues with that, because there are persons who serve as HODs for a period of time. They leave from that post, sometimes voluntarily. You know, they might leave and say, okay, I need a break, and so they leave. But throughout their 3, 4, 5 years there, they have not been placed on the proper pay scale. And so then it becomes difficult to go back and correct that. So that, in terms of, say, salaries, that would be an area that we have to look at, that is already in the rules. Also, too, in terms of salary, when we see more and more that our teachers are, you know, moving up in terms of education. So we no longer have teachers who have high school diplomas now or teachers college now. We have teachers who have done their associates now, masters, and we have a lot now who are doing a bachelor's degree. But you don't see that there's a pay scale specifically for a master's degree, if you will. So if you have a master's degree, for example, I don't go on a new pay scale because I have a master's degree. I would remain on the same scale, which would be my bachelor's degree scale, and I would be given maybe moved up 2 scales or 2 increments up on that same pay scale. So there's not a separate pay scale for a teacher who has a master's degree, except if you are in administration, then you are put up on another scale because you're in admin and you have a master's degree. So areas like that, in terms of, say, salaries, would be maybe what we'd be looking at to ensure that one, there's enforcement of the rules that speak to HOD, but that we also consider, you know, putting something in place to address, because as I said, our teachers, more and more of our teachers now are getting their master's degree and now doctorate as well. So we have to address those areas.
Okay.
Other than that, the other things that we would have to be looking at in terms of, say, teachers, we have to be looking at the matter of planning, and how do we look at teachers doing lesson planning, because a lot of time is spent on writing these plans, and then by the time you finish write 5-6 hours of planning, then you have to go into preparing your activities and your charts and so forth, and it sort of takes away from making your games and having your charts and doing your interactive activities, because you spend so much time actually writing lesson plans. So I think we are at a point where we need to be now looking as what was offered for this pandemic, looking at our teachers at various levels. So for example, a new teacher, a young teacher, you are learning and you are practicing your skill, and so those teachers then would be expected to plan as is normal right now, or what would be the normal planning way. Yeah. Teachers who have maybe, let's say, 15 years, 20 years of experience would not have to be doing all of those detailed planning, so that then you can spend more time, working on activities, on hands-on, on making your lessons more child-friendly, that kind of thing. So we have to look at that and see if our teachers are spending sufficient time, or if they have enough time to be doing the things that matter most in terms of our lesson delivery and lesson planning. Then we have to look at our classroom size. How is that affecting the productivity of our teachers and students? If you give me, Marlene, 35-year-old students, and you expect that I will be doing one-on-one with these students, and I would be able to be bringing them to a certain level, it's difficult for you to have 35-year-old children who come to you, with basic, and you have to bring it to a certain level. Infant 2 is the same. So we have shared with the ministry, listen, let us look at having different levels. So at the lower level, where we have to be setting foundation, let us have smaller class sizes, maybe 15 in a class, so that the teacher can then have more time to do one-on-one with our children, and they can spend more time, giving that foundation. But at the same time, we have to hold them accountable. So whoever is in administration should ensure that these teachers are really and truly meeting the needs of their students, and at the end of the year, you don't have half of your class having to repeat because they didn't get what they were supposed to get. So that is an important area that we have to look at. We have to look at.
Let me stick up in there. Isn't that where the private school system is somewhat ahead of the public school system in terms of being able to limit the classroom sizes to ensure that there is sufficient one-on-one time being spent with students?
In terms of that aspect specifically, yes. But in terms of, say, performance and that kind of thing, we are not too far apart. Okay. I mean, if you have smaller class size, you can do a bit more. But you have to look at too the children who go to those private schools and the kind of access that they have as well. So
but smaller class sizes also equals more classes and then more teachers as well.
More classes.
Well, Marlene, if we look at the way how the rules are set right now, you have levels. That's the word I'm looking for, but I'll use that for right now. You have different ranges. So, for example, it speaks to having between 15 and 30 students. That would give you one teacher, right? So that should mean that if I have 15 students in a class, I could have a teacher for 15 students, because that's the minimum of the level. But when we look at overall assigning staff to a school based on enrollment, we don't really look at it from the minimum, but we look at it from the maximum. So where a school could have had maybe, let's say, 10 teachers, they might only have 7, because we are looking at the overall number and we're dividing it by 30 or that number. So, but some schools already have 4 classes of infant 1, infant 2. And they may have maybe 20, 22 children. So again, we have to look at something that will work for the students first and foremost, and also for the system. And then we have special ed, Marlene, is a very important area that we're not looking into much. Special education, really we need to spend more time in putting things in place for our special needs students. Because
That's right.
more and more now we are having these students coming into the regular classroom, and
That's
so we have
right.
to cater to them, but we have to cater to also the ones at Salaries. And
Yeah.
then, as Ruth spoke earlier, technology. We have to start to include a bit more of technology. And let me please stick up in here, because a lot of times our administrators, our principals, and maybe those who are a bit more mature, you know, the older principals, they seem to be afraid of technology. And so they would prefer for teachers to literally sit down and write out every grade and tally it by hand, you know, as opposed to the teachers doing their grade book on the computer, you know,
Do a
handing.
spreadsheet or
Yeah.
something.
Correct, and
Yeah.
that saves the teacher time.
Yeah.
It's a bit more, you know, more accurate, and it's easier to go in and make corrections. But
Yeah.
we have some principals who are hell-bent on, you have to put it in our book because that is how I want it. So
Or that's how it used to
A
be
great
done.
book.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you have to move with the age.
So I love where you're going with this. So we're talking about looking at class sizes. This is what you hope. I mean, so again, we're going back to the issue. There's an election coming up. We're talking about big education issues on the horizon, or changes that maybe have been well overdue. So you're talking about class sizes. You're talking about kind of becoming more technologically savvy and allowing the infrastructure for it as well. What else are you seeing? Because we're running out of time quickly, so I want you to ensure that you get in some of the things that you feel are critical decisions to be made within the near future.
Okay, so I will have Ruth join in shortly, but we have not, Marlene, we have not even looked at, in terms of, say, the teacher aspect. And so, you know, wellness for our teachers, things like counseling, having counselors in schools. So other areas that would affect the teachers in general, we haven't even touched that, but I'll give Ruth a chance to quickly add a few more.
Okay.
I believe an area that has not been addressed, and especially at high school level, we need to look at, the SBAs have become very burdensome to the teachers. If a teacher is spending more time checking papers than with the student, then something's wrong in that balance. And if that is happening, it means that, one, the teacher is overwhelmed, two, the teacher is not being compensated for the additional work, and three, there's more emphasis on checking papers, spending time with papers, than spending time with the children. We need to ensure that we are looking at these specific aspects. We do have a CSEC committee. Where is this committee? Who is spearheading it? What are the decisions that are being carried out here? We need to have answers. We have too many questions. We need to ensure that that last memo sent, I think it was in June, from our CSEC registrar, saying that we're still going to have all these SBA components in place. Where are we with this in terms of compensation for teachers? And it's not only about compensation, but it is really and truly highlighting, because if you would speak to some teachers, they would rather not get the compensation, have somebody else check the SBA so that they can spend quality time with their children. And we have to stress on that. Are we looking at these aspects of education in a fair manner, not only for the teachers, but also for the students?
Yeah.
We need to look at, and we're talking about class sizes here, but the same way the class sizes are important at high school level, we're looking at this, and the president touched on it, the special education. I am glad to see that there are some schools that have made changes to accommodate children with special needs, but this is not happening nationwide. We still see high schools with no internet, no technology, where the teachers are having a hard time being able to cope with this new technological era, and that should not be. These are conversations that need to happen. Yes, it's good, we're moving into that, but what are our leaders doing to ensure that these areas, especially remote areas, are catered to, that they have what it needs to ensure that the children are being reached to? Yeah. I've always embraced what the current Minister of Education has said, no child left behind. This is the time we have to ensure that no child is left behind.
Yeah.
And there should be absolutely no excuse acceptable for leaving a child behind.
Yeah.
So I embrace this slogan, no child left behind. Let's act on that.
Okay. Well, ladies.
Marlene,
Uh-huh.
Can I?
Yes.
Go ahead.
One, in terms of what is happening right now and this pandemic and what our teachers are going through, we have seen where there is so much confusion in terms of what happens when a teacher at the school tests positive, what are the protocols in place, what do you do, is the principal informed, should they inform their teachers so the teachers know that that there's a person at the school who is positive, that kind of thing. And it is putting our teachers in a lot of them are on easy positions because these things are happening, and it's as if though some of our administrations are taking this lightly and they're not informing their teachers, that we might have a positive person on staff, be careful, that kind of thing. And even though the teachers do as much as possible, are careful in how they go about, day to day, these are things that are very important. And I want to appeal to our administrators. Assist your staff as much as possible in terms of providing them. We have signed on to ILO convention that deals with occupational health and safety, providing them with these safety things. Your staff should not be the ones to be buying these things. And we haven't even touched the matter of the cost that teachers have to bear in terms of preparing their classrooms and having their aids and that sort of thing. That's another story. Yeah. But I am appealing to our administrators and our management to kindly provide these things for our teachers. Secondly, if you have teachers at your school who have been tested positive or who have been in contact with somebody who is positive, do the right thing, I would say, and at least inform the teachers so that they are aware that if they were doing something that was not, they were not being as careful as they should be, that they would then be conscious of what they are doing, because we don't want this thing to be spreading over the place. Absolutely. So I am really appealing to our administrators to look at these things and be sensitive to the needs of our teachers, especially those who at this time may be testing positive. You can't have them homesick and forcing them to do work. Family members die, they need that little time to grieve. All of, these areas that are sensitive right now as we go through. I'm appealing to our administrators and our management to please be sensitive to our teachers during this time.
All right.
And President, if I may, to expand a little on that, I think it is important to emphasize, and I've heard the comments, if everybody else has to go to work, then why can't teachers go? It is not about that. It is about being able to carry out your job in the best way possible. And if there are options, if there are ways in which you can carry out your job without becoming exposed. Mm-hmm. We forget these teachers have to travel on public transportation, and we don't even want to go that direction in about the health hazards of being in a public transportation. But the conversation should be, should teachers go to school mandatory because that is what the rule says and you must clock in and clock out? Or is it about what can you produce and where best can you produce it? Some schools have no internet, yet they are expected to do the planning and research at school. Teachers can produce more if they're at home or they have internet.
Yeah.
And they are not becoming exposed. If a teacher becomes sick with COVID, that's 15 days without being in contact with their children. The children are losing out. Yeah. So are we thinking strategically? Or is it that we just want to, like we said earlier, how far are we willing to bend the rules, make amendments? Because in this country, when we want an SI, it appears in the flash of an eye. Overnight, we have an SI. So what are we doing to ensure that at the end, like it's always said, it's all about the children. It's all about the children then, because if a teacher becomes exposed, a teacher has to be out. Ultimately, the children will pay the price because they will be without a teacher for that period of time. Yeah. So can't the teachers who have all these issues and have to travel to reach to a classroom where they can't perform anyway, you're stuck in this classroom all day long, and then when you go home, you still have to start your work because there was no internet at home all day, at school all day long. So now the teacher has to be at school all day and then work all night to be able to complete the task just because you have to clock in and clock out. There are ways in which the teacher can be assessed to ensure that he or she is carrying out her duties on time. There, we have to be creative. We have to be
and I
innovative.
understand that President Smith had at one point offered to negotiate at least a few days in school and the rest with the work from home option. I hear your plea, and I know that it is one that you have continuously made. As we see new cases popping up all over the country, perhaps that will be something that will be amended. And we'll keep on following that one. But in terms of the wider conversation, looking forward with education issues that definitely will have to be addressed. We appreciate you sharing your perspective on these. Stay safe, ladies, and thank you once again.
Thank you, Marlene.
Thank you.
All right. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take our final break, and when we come back, we'll have our wrap-up. So stay tuned.